everyone, welcome back to Whiskey Racing. Today I'm going to show you how to install an oil pressure and water temp gauge in a 1970 Dodge Challenger with a 440 in it. This can be applied to any car really. I mean, specifically big block Mopars as far as like sensor location, but if you're working on a Chevy, Ford, doesn't really matter as long as you know where the sensor connects to. Hooking them up is the same thing. Alright, so we have these Autometer gauges here. They're just the auto gauge, 3-gauge panel, oil, volts, water. Really just want to do the oil and the water just so we have something here to be able to monitor this engine. So you open up the package on the gauges. I mean, they come in the 3-gauge holder here. I want to take them out as long as they fit. There's a holder in the car for 2 gauges. We're doing oil pressure, water temp. The holder in the car is actually from like a 60s Malibu, so it's a little more vintage. I just need some accurate gauges, and you also get some screws to mount the holder, fittings for the lines, and some caps for the lights. You can have them green or red. We're going to go green to match the factory lighting in the car. Obviously you get the probe on here for your water temp gauge right there, and you get this nylon fitting for your oil pressure gauge. When we tell you to do it, this is throw it away. It's junk, it leaks every time. What you want is this, you want to run copper to your oil pressure gauge. Not only does it have a tendency to leak a lot less, it also passes tech if you ever intend on taking your car to a drag strip. Everything I own goes to a drag strip, so it's just a prerequisite for me. So I just went and tossed them in there. I didn't even like fasten them down. I just want to make sure they fit. I didn't know if the holder in this car was for 2 16ths or not. Turning our attention under the hood, right there, that's a fitting for the water temp gauge. There's one in this car years ago. So we got to put that back in there, take that out, put the new one in. So if you come around the back of the engine here, you can see that line right there. That's your oil pressure line. Apparently already had a gauge in there. Maybe it already has one running, so we can kind of use that as a template of where we're running ours through, because that's the next thing you got to figure out, where you're running these through the firewall to the cabin. Before you get started removing the old stuff though, you do have to drain the coolant before you do the temp sensor, so let's get that drained. Coming under the dash, you can see how they just sort of curly cued the old copper line. So we're going to take that out and then install a new line to hook up the oil gauge. We're starting with the oil pressure gauge install. So what I did here is got the new copper line, and obviously that goes down to there. So just kind of as a, let's say a template, because it's what we're using, but so you know how much line to use. Kind of. Obviously you need to put your fittings on and stuff, but that gives you an idea. Then let's go back inside the car and see where it's at in relation to the gauge. So through the car, it's a little short, so we're going to take another coil or 2 off of this. And we can always trim it before final assembly. And remember, you want to put a rubber grommet in that hole there coming through the firewall. So now it's time to assemble the line for the gauge. Obviously we cut it the length. You get 2 compression nuts, 2 ferrules that go inside the nut. So when you're putting this together, see how the focus here, it's tapered at one end. The flat side of the ferrule goes into the compression fitting. Well, you get the idea. That screws onto the back of the gauge and on the engine, and we tighten everything down. So let's do that. One other thing here, I do put a little thread sealer on the fitting come out of the back of the engine and the back of the gauge, put it on the male end of the connection. I do just use the Permatex high temp, so I'm going to clean up that fitting on the motor, put some of this, and then we're going to run the line. So we got it hooked up to the engine. Obviously we got a little bit too much in here, so we're going to trim that down. Next up is the water temp gauge, and we're going to have to drill a hole in the firewall for this one to be able to get that to pass through. I'm guessing there was an oil pressure gauge, or I had a hole for that, so let's drill a hole. So before you drill your hole, remember to check both sides of the firewall. So it's going to come out and it's going to run down this side of the intake. We're going to snake it around the distributor, and it goes in that fitting on the oil pump right here. But unfortunately, like the heater box and everything's back there, so it's not like you can just drill a hole and call it good. We're going to go somewhere over here. So if we go up and left, that puts us like right in there, which that could work. Just don't go too far, because you don't want to drill your brake line, and you don't want to drill your wire harness. All right, so we got the hole drilled in the firewall. Have the probe ran around here, around the distributor, and we're just gonna put it right there. Make sure that's clear of any moving parts. Not super happy with it, but I want to kind of redo up here. I want to get a regular alternator bracket for it and clean this up a bit. So when I do that, I may move how I run the probe, but for now we're gonna have gauges in the car, and that's the important part. Coming up front here, so take the probe back out. The fitting that goes into the water pump there, you want to put thread sealer on this, put that in, tighten it, and then same thing there, just a dab of thread sealer, tighten it up, make sure you're holding the mounting nut when you're tightening that up. And this is what it looks like assembled. Once you tighten the probe for the water temp gauge, it's already hooked up, so that's good to go. And then you just put your fitting on the end of the oil pressure line, tighten it up. You can see I do put some thread sealer on there. And then tighten up these 8mm nuts so the gauges stay mounted. Start the car up, check for leaks, and that part's done. So the last thing we have to do here is wire up the gauges so they light up. So you can see them at night. So there's each of them come with, ground and power. I usually ground them somewhere under the dash. I mean, this is all metal. So that screw right there, I'm just gonna wrap the wire around there. I could even put a little end on it and ground it there. And then we're gonna run these. I'm not a wiring guy, I hate wiring. I do it the old school way. We're gonna add some wire to that and run it to the fuse box for the lights. So when the dash lights are on, the gauge lights are on. So if we look at the fuse box here, it's by the steering column. You can see the top there says instruments. We're going to run the power wire to that fuse. Okay, so we ran the power wires to the fuse box. We're going to hit our light switch. And look at that. We got gauges, headlights on, gauges stay on. We're going to clean up here and we're good to go. All right, everybody, so that's going to wrap up our video on the gauge installation. Hopefully it was helpful to you. It went very well. I hate wiring. It's my least favorite thing to do, and I had no trouble with it. So it's a fairly straightforward job as long as you know where the sensors go for the gauges. So anyway, as always, thanks for tuning in. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button if you haven't, and maybe I'll see you out at South Mountain this weekend on October 29th. It's their last race of the season. They're also having a trunk or treat. We're going to be there racing, probably the Hellcat, maybe the Camaro, Durango. I don't know what I'm bringing yet. And then taking the pumpkin over. They're having a trunk or treat. You can see my buddy's already in the trunk ready to go. So maybe I'll see you guys there. Later.